Before the success stories, the progress, there was you. You who made a choice to grow, to inspire, to overcome your own challenges. At NASM, we're in service of your limitless potential because when you keep growing, we all get stronger. And we'll never stop making your journey our mission. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified personal trainer.
You're listening to the NASM CPT podcast with Richey, winner of the Share Care Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM CPT podcast. My name is Richey, and today we're going to go over upper crossed syndrome. We're doing this on page 811 of your CPT 7 textbook. So if you want to follow along with me and look at the static postural assessments, we're looking at the upper cross syndrome. Static's top of the page, and there are a list of distortions there. So pes planus, lower cross syndrome, and sorry, I said distortions. Syndrome's a much better word. And then upper cross syndrome. And then here's what I want to do. I'm going to go down the list. Here's the overactive list, and then I'll go on the underactive list. And let me also point out potentially. This is the potential. This is not the right answer. This is not the only way that it can be. These are potentials. It's not every one of these muscles. It may not be any of these muscles. It just depends on what the cause is. But if we're looking at a mechanical cause of upper cross syndrome, then this will have a great contribution to what we're seeing. And so we will only really focus a lot on mechanical. We can focus on movement, right, which has to do with neuromuscular and engaging our muscles. That all of this has to do with neural as well. It's not just mechanical, but let's have a look at it. Upper cross syndrome. Let's look at the overactive muscles. Here we go. Overactive. Upper trapezius, levator scapulae, sternocleidomastoid, pec major, and pec minor. All right, well, if I go through that list of things, then I have to say, what do all of those muscles have in common? Well, let's define what upper cross syndrome is. What does it look like? Upper cross syndrome is when you are protracted at the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blades are protracted. You're likely internally rotated at your humerus. You are elevated at your scapula. So elevation and protraction. And it also has a tendency to create a giggity forward head position. So if I got a forward head, I've got elevation in my scapula, I've got protraction in my scapula, I likely have internal rotation at the glenohumeral joint, so my shoulder joint's internally rotated. That's an upper cross syndrome, or what sometimes we often refer to as office back, right? My protracted, elevated, internally rotated. I have a forward head looking at my screen, and then you step away and you stand up, and that part stays. You're still protracted, elevated at the scapula, internally rotated at the humerus, and a forward head at the head. Then we have to look at these muscles, and we'll have something to say about it. So let's go through the overactive muscles again. Overactive muscles, upper traps and levator scapula. Both of those elevate the scapula. They create the shrug. They create the elevation in the scapula. Then we've got the sternocleidomastoid, a major contributor, as are the other two, to a forward head position. The upper traps and the levator scapula both can create a forward head position. When in tandem with the SCM, sternocleidomastoid, it creates a forward head position. Two of them on the back side, creating a forward head and elevation of the scapula. And then on the front side, when they work together, right and left SCMs create a forward head as well. All right, so what else is there? Pec major, pec minor. Pec major and pec minor. Pec major can protract the scapula and internally rotate the humerus. Pec minor is a big protractor of the scapula. In fact, it is such a big protractor of the scapula that it oftentimes shuts down The other big protractor of the scapula that we have to constantly work on and able to get it to function in many people. The pec minor is so strong of a protractor and a downward rotator of the scapula that the protractor upward rotator of the scapula oftentimes needs help waking up. This is perfect concept of synergistic dominance, a couple of muscles that do similar things, and one of them takes over, the other one goes, oh, you want to take it? You take it. Fine, I'll just back off. And that is the serratus anterior. The pec minor can become very synergistically dominant to the serratus anterior. So those are our muscles that are potentially short, tight, overactive, and upper cross syndrome. We're looking at upper traps, levator scapula, SCM, pec major, and pec minor. Those are 5 muscles in that grouping. Remember, forward head, elevation of the scapula, protraction of the scapula, and then generally because of scapulohumeral rhythm, we also see internal rotation of the glenohumeral joint at the shoulder. Okay, underactive muscles. Which muscles might be underactive in this? We've got the deep cervical flexors, so the muscles on the front of the neck that kind of retract the head. And so from a forward head position, they go into a retraction, and they can also flex the neck, but they are so deep that we get this flexion of the neck and some other muscles, including the SCM, but we want to flex in a different way. It's actually like it goes from a lordosis of the cervical spine in a forward head, and then we still have a lordosis in the cervical spine, but we want it to be far less. So the deep cervical flexors will do that and help us keep that double chin position that we've talked about on the forward head episode. The somebody going in for a kiss that you don't want to kiss and you just kind of retract the head. That's the position to be in there. And then we also see the muscles of the scapula. They are, so here we go again, underactive muscles, deep cervical flexors, rhomboids, mid traps, lower traps. Deep cervical flexors, rhomboids, low traps, middle traps. All right, well, deep cervical flexors create that kind of double chin, retracted head position. The rhomboids retract the scapula. The middle traps retract the scapula. The lower traps also retract the scapula, but they also are responsible for depression of the scapula. So if we have elevation that's also going on, then the lower traps might be a significant focus because we need it to be twice as strong. We need it to be strong in retraction, and we need it to be strong in scapular depression as well. And you can see this if you go through, and the muscles you can do releases on, you can release, most of them will be muscles that you can stretch, and then immediately do things for exercises like chin tucks, quadruped chin tucks, band on the back of the head and retract while you're holding that band against the back of the head. And it's not a lot of tension, not a lot of pressure, but you would create that retraction against a light load to teach, not to make it strong necessarily, to teach the muscle what we want it to do and an activation to be. And then we practice maybe YTAs, light dumbbell cobras, floor cobras, the floor T's, the floor Y's, those scaptions, rear delt flies, and then cobras where you're retracting and depressing the scapula. And if you can do that and then have them stand up and watch their form after doing some YTAs, watch them doing some floor cobras, some ball cobras, some bent over cobras, and then have them stand back to the static posture. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. Now, sometimes just out of neurological habit, people tend to go back to it, which is why some people say, oh, it's not a muscle strength issue. It is a neurological thing, not a neurological dysfunction. It's just that that's a pattern we've created and we like to stay there. And there's truth to that. But how do we get out of that? How do we teach neurologically? We do it through resistance and repetition. It doesn't have to be heavy resistance. It doesn't have to be. We don't We don't put one of those halos around our head and just retract for 1 rep maxes. We're trying to repeat over and over again to get the nervous system to know that this is a position we want to be in, and then see if we can maintain that. We also do that by inhibiting and stretching some of the other muscles, the pec major, the pec minor, the SCM, the upper traps, the levator scapula. Let's stretch those out. Let's, if they're possible, to do some type of inhibitory technique on them. Stretch, and then do some strengthening, and then almost immediately you'll see that form get better. Now, we want to integrate it and see if we can maintain that form. So that could be something like doing a push or a pull exercise, an upper body exercise, and maintaining that neutral head position and going through protraction as we push, going through retraction as we pull, and make sure that we're doing that in good form and we're not seeing a jutting position in the head, or when we push or pull, that we don't also see elevation when we have protraction and retraction. Again, there's not always something wrong when we see the shoulders elevate if I push, but it does indicate to me that if I push and elevate, or if I pull something and elevate, then I am relying on an elevation of my scapula, which may show some type of dyskinesis, a movement pattern that we are not preferring, that can lead to something that we don't want in our movement patterns. For instance, like I have a hard time doing bench press with a barbell, and I have a scapular stability issue when it comes to barbell. Now, when it comes to dumbbell, I can lift heavy, I can lift fine, I do well with dumbbells. Some reason barbells kill my shoulder, right? And so over time, and as I try to address it and get my scapula to move better, at the end of the day, I remove barbell work from my pressing program because I don't want a chance that dysfunction will come back in. I will shrug, and then all of a sudden I have retorn a rotator cuff, or I have rotator cuff tendonitis or biceps tendonitis again. So I steer clear of that. I'm not using me as a warning, like, oh, guys, be careful. I'm just saying, let's look at movement and address the movement. If I want you to push and not elevate, can I teach you to do that? That's just as easy as saying, if I want you to do something, can I teach you to do it right or not incorrect if you do it the other way? Can you learn it? Do you have a control over your bodily movement that you can identify a movement pattern and you can do it a certain way? And if you can't, then that's a lack of ability of communication with that body part, the body segment. And we want to see if we can get you to train it in a different way that better supports a movement pattern that we want. And I think that that could be very beneficial for the majority of the people out there, especially if we get super shruggy and then people will complain. They complain about all sorts of things. It could be headaches. It could be tightness in their traps and their shoulders. And that's because every time they push something or pull something, they shrug in addition to it. It's unnecessary, and we can remove that pattern, but we have to teach them what we want. So let's go through this one more time. Here's our overactive list and underactive list for upper cross syndrome. First of all, upper cross syndrome can be a combination of forward head, elevation, and protraction at the scapula, and internal rotation at the humerus. Overactive muscles: upper traps, levator scapulae, sternocleidomastoid, pec major, pec minor. The underactive muscles: the deep cervical flexors, rhomboids, mid traps, and lower traps. Y'all, thanks for listening. I hope that you find this very helpful. It can be helpful for the test, but the real test is it helpful when you go out there and you work with clients and you see it and can address it. And that's what we want. We want the application of knowledge, not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. So thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family. If you got questions for me, hit me up. You can do so on Instagram at dr.rickrichey or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM CPT Podcast.